Hello, my name is Mrs. Yee, and I will be your Personal Management Merit Badge Counselor. I'm from Troop 184 in Loveland, Colorado, and I have 2 Eagle Scouts who are now in college, and so they're out of the program, but I'm still teaching personal management just because I have a love for this merit badge, and I think it's a really important merit badge. So let me kind of give you an introduction today on what we're going to be covering. First off, personal management includes money management, time management, project management, career management, and I'm going to toss a little communication management in here and there. All of those are really important things, but the bulk of the merit badge is about money management, but we will cover all of those. It is an Eagle required merit badge, and so I'm guessing that a lot of the Scouts out there that are doing this today are either older Scouts or are aspiring to be Eagle Scouts, and I think that's great. I think it's just an amazing merit badge. It's life-changing. That's why I'm passionate about it, because if you follow through on the different aspects of this merit badge and really put it into practice, it's life-changing. You'll have more money to work with in your life. You'll be able to do more things with that, and that will be less stressful. So there's a lot of great reasons for it, and I hope that you will agree when we're done with this merit badge. So as we do the video, there is an online piece that will be included with this, and I'll answer those questions, or whoever your merit badge counselor is at that time will do that in the live portion. But what you're going to see for the video is you will see up in this corner an indicator of what requirement we're currently on. So if you get out of sync or need to find just one section, you can go and use that as a key to figure out which question you're at. So we're going to be working out of this Personal Management Merit Badge book. It was brought back out in 2019. That's the revision we're on, and there was a change to it in September of 2020. And it's really important for you to use the Merit Badge workbook. You can search on that online, and if you search under Personal Management Worksheet, you'll get a PDF of this workbook, and it has all of the different requirements, a box for each one, and I do want you to record your answers as we go through, because since we're having to do things online, or this is online, that's going to be the way that we can tell that you did that requirement. There still may be some meeting with your counselor and filling out blue cards. All of that will be worked out outside of this video. But this workbook is really critical to logging your answers, and so that you can show that you have done the work. So print this out if you haven't already done so. It's the September 2020 version that I'm working off of. But if there's a new one that's come out since this video was created, most likely it is really close to this, and so I wouldn't worry about the difference in the revision. It still is going to be fine. Let's see, what else do we need to do? I am going to do each of the requirements in order, but your actual merit badge counselor, or if I do this live, I may not do that in order. And the reason is some of them, such as requirement 2, has a 13-week log, and so you really need to get that started pretty early, so that would definitely be covered in the first day. And then there's requirement 8, which has a week-long calendar aspect to it, and that, if we did it in order, that might not happen soon enough for you to get the week calendar done. So if they skip ahead, you can find that place in the video and go to section 8 if you need to at that time. So just keep that in mind, that might not be in order. And one other piece, and that is there's a couple of definitions I want to give right up front, because they can be just a little bit confusing and I might interchange them. So the first one is when we're talking about cash, or we're talking about your checking account, or a debit card. I'm going to kind of use those 3 terms interchangeably, because all of them sort of encompass the money that we're using on a daily basis. It might be physically the cash in our wallet. It might be the plastic debit card that we use to buy something and that immediately is withdrawn from our bank account. Or it could be the checking account itself, where we write a check on that account, and that's where the money is coming from. So all of those are going to be kind of interchangeably used, and think of those all as cash, or that real, very ready money for you. Now let's contrast that by a savings account. That is also at a bank, such as the checking account is at a bank. When you open one up, you often get both accounts at the same time. The checking account is included for your daily things, and the savings account is more the longer term look. It's more the store it away kind of account. You don't have as much activity there. It's used for emergencies, it's used for bigger purchases, where the checking account and your cash is used for more smaller things and everyday things. So I hope that makes sense on the two of them. So checking account, cash and debit card, or your savings account. And then the last definition I want to give you at this time is the word credit. And that is actually kind of a loaded word. We're going to use it in several different ways, and that's when it gets confusing. So credit could be for a credit card, which is you swipe when you make a purchase somewhere, and you don't have to give them physically money at that moment, but you will have to give them money later on. So it's a buy it now, pay for it later. And you've bought something on credit with a credit card. Now let's contrast that with something is credited to your account. So it's similar to the same sort of thing as a teacher giving credit for a correct answer on an exam. If you put money into your account, it is credited to you, or put on account that you put that in there. So that's a good thing. Okay, so that's another type of the way we'll use credit. And the last way is credit score, and that's kind of a financial look at your whole situation, and a credit agency will kind of decide how trustworthy you are in repaying money if you should get a loan, and if you're able to pay back a loan, and how much you might be able to get a loan for. So that's called a credit score. We'll discuss it at length later, but generally a higher score is good. So that's the third way that we would use the term credit score. So thanks for coming to Personal Management. Let's get started on Requirement 1. So let's get started on Requirement 1. Now this one is, choose an item that your family might want to purchase that is considered a major purchase. Now this is going to vary from family to family, but I'm just going to say, let's make sure that the item is more than $100 and that it's a stretch goal for your family. So if we're choosing an item, over the years when I've taught this merit badge, some typical things that come up are we need a new computer for our family, or we might want to buy a new house, or remodel something on the one that we have, or we need a new roof, for example, or we need a new front door, or maybe we need some furniture. We need a new couch, or our refrigerator's about to die, and so we need a new something there. It might be we want a new pet, and maybe it's an expensive pet, and so that's a bigger expense. I've even had somebody that was going to buy, or their family wanted to buy an island, and that had never crossed my mind before. But I guess you can buy an island in various parts of the world, and they're about the cost of a house here on the low end if you buy a small island. But it's kind of a fixer-upper. You don't have any electricity or services for that. So there's a lot of things that could fall into this category. So just pick something that matches for your family and write that into the box on number 1A. Now everything that you buy, at least seems to, need some maintenance from time to time. It might have taxes associated with it that recur. And so you kind of got to figure those sort of things in too for your item. So jot that down in your box, and then let's look at number 1B, which is write a plan that tells how your family would save money for the purchase identified in Requirement 1A. So writing a plan for that. So there's a number of things that your family could do. So the things that come to my mind, or we could set aside some of our disposable income for that. So how would you do that? Well, Maybe somebody has a tip jar, or not really a tip jar, but they get tips in their job. And maybe you put all of those tips into a coin jar at your house, and that, is saved for the big item. Or just, over the course of the day, you end up with some coins in your pocket and put those in that coin jar. That can be a way to sort of not realize how much you're saving for that item. Another thing would be to wait to purchase something else so that you can use the money that you do have to put towards that new item. You could also work extra hours at an existing job. That might be a possibility. Or add on an additional job of some sort, such as for our scouts, you might want to talk to a neighbor, for example, that might have some leaves to rake or some yard work they want to do. You could ask Grandma if she needs some help with something and might pay you something. So that's adding a job or adding some extra hours and extra income for finding extra money to buy that item. The other thing you can do is cut out some expenses or make a choice that makes it a little cheaper than what you normally might have done. So for instance, a big one on this is the choice of either eating at home and cooking or to go out to eat. And I'm a big fan of the cookie merit badge, and I will say this probably throughout all of the different requirements on this merit badge. Learn to cook. It will save you a lot of money over the course of your life. And I just can't emphasize it enough that will save you money. And oftentimes the quality will be much better and better healthy eating for you. So definitely would encourage that. Might also skip something, such as maybe you normally do a movie night or you do go to a certain game. You might skip that and just stay home or do something else that's less expensive. So those are some options that you could do, and I'm sure you can come up with some more on your own for 1B, which is writing your plan to save money for that item. So do that now, if you haven't already been doing that while I've been talking. And then let's look at 1B1, which is discuss the plan with your merit badge counselor. So since we're not having a real back and forth conversation here, let's just sort of summarize what those things that could be in your plan. They're either going to be something along the lines of bringing more money into your family, such as those extra hours or extra jobs, or a way of spending less. So saving money in activities you do or do not do. So it's a more income or fewer expenses. So that's where you should be really thinking about for doing that. So now, question 1B2 is to discuss the plan with your family. And this is going to be homework, so note that. Put maybe a star or something by that box that I need to contact my family and do that. Maybe you have a family meeting, or you can just talk over dinner sometime. Oh, I have to do this for my personal merit or management merit badge, and discuss what ideas your family have. You might be surprised at great ideas that they have. So that about covers that. So whoever is going to be checking your workbook later will need to make sure you talk about that and how that discussion went. And then number 3 is discuss how other family needs must be considered in this plan. So you might say, hey, I want to save some money, so we're not going to feed my sister this week. Well, that's not practical. And your sister's not going to be real happy about that. So, but let's, talk seriously here. What could be a family expense that needs to be considered, or a family need that would come first over buying this new item? Well, for example, you might have had some sort of medical situation in your family, and that family member's medical needs might come first over purchasing something or product. And so that has to be worked out as a family on how you're going to do that. Another possibility could be, say, the family car needs some sort of repair done to it. Maybe it had an accident, or it's getting old and it needs new tires, something like that. that's a fairly major expense as well, and so that would need to be considered. So discuss those things with your family, or discuss with your family and consider those family needs on 1B3. So now let's look at 1C, where you're going to develop a written shopping strategy for the purchase identified in requirement 1A. So let's just look at a couple of those ones that we mentioned earlier. You might want to buy a new car. That's a pretty common one that comes up, is we need a new car for our family. And so the first thing on the shopping strategy is, are you going to try and buy a new car, or are you going to buy a used car? Well, definitely the used car should be cheaper. Of course, it depends on what you're buying. But if you might, if you have the money, you might want to consider new. That's a great thing if you can buy a new car. But you've got to make that choice first, and then you have a shopping plan that matches depending on which thing that you're going to do. If you're buying new, you're going to look at car dealerships and see what they have on their lot. Get the magazines that they put out, or the catalogs that they put out for their product line each year, and see what's available and what the prices are for those things. If you're buying used, you're going to be looking for, say, ads in the newspaper, where they have all the pictures of different cars that people are trying to sell. You might look just around in your community. Sometimes people will put a for sale sign on their car out in the front of your yard, and if you see one that you like, that might work out. You could look, say, at places like Craigslist, and get information about what sort of pricing there should be from sources like Carfax or Kelley Blue Book. Looking at ads in the newspaper, they'll have, the car dealerships will have ads out as well. Those are a lot of different places you can get some information about something such as buying a new car. Another one was electronics, let's just say, or a new computer. Well, how would you look or decide how you want to shop for that? Well, first you really need to figure out what your needs are. If you're buying a computer, maybe you need it to do a particular task, or you need a laptop versus a desktop, or an iPad, or a tablet, or whatever it might be, or a new phone. What are the features and price for each of those things that make sense for what you need? You might be looking for online ads, and you might wait for a sale, such as in what we call the grads and dads season, which is the May-June time frame. So graduates in May, and Father's Day in June, where there's a lot of sales of items like electronics. You might have those same sort of things in back to school, and you might find some things at Christmas time as well. So those are some possibilities. And then there's always Black Friday, when everything goes on sale, so to speak, or at least they want you to believe that. So that's a possibility as well. Another possibility for the family purchase was some home improvement thing, whether it's, let's just say it's remodeling our basement. Well, to do that, you first have to decide, are you able to do this task yourself, or are you going to need a contractor? Most likely you probably want to have some sort of contractor, maybe to do the electrical work, or carpeting, or walls, drywall, plumbing and heating, and all those sort of aspects. And so all of that would need to get put into a bid from your contractor or the contractors for what the work needs to be done. And you might talk to other people who've had their basement finished and get word of mouth recommendations or references for who might be a good contractor to contact about that. You might see ads in the newspaper, or you might look online. So all different possibilities. Now let's just consider we're looking for our island or a new home. Well, in that case, you're probably going to start with a realtor that works in the area where you're interested in, and compare what prices are and what you get for that. Go see some properties and see if those are in the price range that you're looking at, and what features are available, and if it's something you want to pursue. So for your particular item, come up with your written shopping strategy that matches for your item, and then get that written down into that box on 1C. Okay, now let's look at 1C1, which is determine the quality of the item or service using consumer publications or rating systems. So we've kind of touched on a little bit of this. For determining the quality of something, particularly like when we talked about a used car, you might use a Consumer Reports magazine or online reviews to compare quality of that particular item over time. You might be a little, from personal experience, I would just recommend sometimes when you're buying a new car, you might not want to buy the first model year because sometimes they've got some bugs to work out on that. A similar thing on electronics. If you're buying used electronics, sometimes there's problems with them that are really difficult to diagnose, and so it may work most of the time, but not all the time, and that can be pretty frustrating. So just a couple of things to consider about the quality of what you're trying to purchase. And as far as the home improvement project, really talking to people who have used that contractor is a really important thing to see what problems they ran into and how well they were to work with for doing that project. All right, so let's look at, okay, I think we can flip the page here. So the last one here is 1C2, and that is comparison shop for the item. Find out where you can buy the item for the best price and provide prices from at least 2 different price sources. So of course it's going to vary depending on your item again, but let's just say we're doing the electronics. You might look online for some purchasing the computer. You might try a brick and mortar store such as a Best Buy or a big box store like a Walmart, Target, those sort of places for those sort of electronics. And then record the price. So this is homework again. Note that, homework. Put a little star or something by it. And then the second box is call around, study ads, look for sale or discount coupons, and consider the alternatives. So just know what you discover from your research on the different prices. And here it brings up a new thing we haven't talked about yet, which is a discount coupon. Now, particularly for electronics, there can be a discount coupon or code right at that time. There's also online services like Honey that can give you a discount while you're shopping. Or you can look for rebates, which is another thing. So the discount coupon is on the front end and the rebate is on the back end. Now with rebates, they often really hope that you don't turn the rebate in because they want you to make a copy of your receipt, for example, in this particular form, and maybe the UPC code on the box, and put all these things together and mail it off in a certain time frame to somewhere, and then in 12 weeks you'll get a check back or a gift card to spend. Rebates are great, but you do have to jump through the hoops that they specify and do it exactly as they say to get that money back. But it can be significant depending on the item you're purchasing. So for the last 2 boxes, we've got can you buy the item used, and also should you wait for a sale. So for example, a car, you can obviously buy that used, and oftentimes the dealerships might have incentives for certain times, and also the salesman might have quotas that they need to meet. So end of the month could be a good time to buy a car. End of the year might even be a better time to buy a car. We once bought a car on December 31st, and it seemed like a good deal. I don't know if it was the best deal possible, but they were motivated to sell the car, it seemed. So that was an opportunity for us. And then, should you wait for a sale? It depends on how badly you need the item. And if you have the time, sure, why not? Particularly if it's an item that does go on sale regularly during these different periods of time, such as Grads and Dads, Black Friday, back to school, that sort of thing, that you can sort of predict. So that pretty much wraps up item 1. So let's start looking at requirement number 2. Okay, now we should all be ready for requirement 2. So let's look at page 3, which is the beginning of requirement 2, and it starts with 2A. And that says, prepare a budget reflecting your expected income, which includes allowances, gifts, and wages, your expenses, and savings for a period of 13 consecutive weeks. And 13 weeks is roughly 3 months. Now, they have provided in the new revision of the personal management worksheet a sample budget that is already filled in, as well as a blank one that you can use for your information. So those are, let's start with page 20, which is the sample one, and then page 15 will be the blank one that you can use later on. So looking at this, it is by month, so that covers the 3 months is 13 weeks. And so the first top section, which is about a third of the sheet, is all of the income sources for this scout. So if you're looking down that first column, it says allowances, gifts, and wages, and any other sources where there might be income. So this scout has a $20 budget that they get over the course of the month, $16 that they're anticipating they'll get in gifts, $80 in wages, so they've got some sort of job, and then $10 of some other source, they don't specifically say. And when they track their information for actuals, the next column over is actuals, and it said their allowance was still 20, so that's the same, so there's no under over in the third column. Gifts, they got $2 extra, they got 18 instead of 16, so that was a positive $2 in the over under column. They had $60 in wages as opposed to 80, so that was under what they were anticipating, so they must have not been able to work fully the time. So they had a $20 deficit, or a negative 20 in that over under column. And then they had $12.50 in some other source. So $2.50 was above the amount on that particular budget item. So then let's look at the lower 2/3, which is the expenses for the scout. So they have pay yourself first, which is a very good idea. So they had budgeted $25 and actually expended or spent $25 by putting that into their savings account. They anticipated donating $15 and they actually donated $12, so that was a difference of $3. Food and meals, they anticipated $20, $28 they spent, so they actually spent more. And then just look at the clothing, entertainment, CDs, hobbies, books, and other. So in the very bottom, it looks like they had a difference of $17.85. And that's kind of the under amount they had anticipated. And then at the top was $15.50. That was the difference of their income and expenses. And so they were short $15.50 on what they anticipated on income, but they spent less than they were anticipating either also. So in effect, they had a difference of $2.35. So that's not too bad for that first month. So hopefully that's clear for you on what type of things are going to be going into these different categories. So you're really just looking at how many different sources of income do I have, what do I anticipate per month. For instance, I'm recording this in November. November might be low, but December might be higher if you're anticipating some gifts from family members or friends. And you might also be spending more if you're buying gifts for others. But take a look at this and use the next sheet, which is the blank one, which is page 15, and fill that out for your own information. And then later on, you're going to be recording actuals. So this is requirement 2A, preparing that budget. So in 2B, they want us to compare the expected income and expected expenses. So we did that with the sample, and you would need to do it on your own as well. Are you trying to spend more than what you think you're going to have for income, or are you trying to save a lot because you're going to spend less? So the question for 2B1 is, if expenses exceeded budget income, determine steps to balance your budget. So let's just step back a second. If expenses, that's what you spend, is more than your income. So in other words, you're in the hole. You don't have enough money to spend all that. So what are you going to do? Well, you can find ways to spend less, or you can bring more money in. Maybe like we talked in the earlier session, talking about finding new sources of income, maybe helping grandma or a neighbor with some projects, or really looking hard at the expenses that you planned and saying, you know what, I really don't need to do that. And make those adjustments as needed. Maybe there's a different way I can still accomplish it without spending as much money. So that's what they're looking for on 2B1. So as we turn the page, on this one, we're looking at income exceeds budget expenses. That means you have more money than what you're anticipating to spend. State how you would use the excess money that works out of your budget. So they're suggesting perhaps a new goal or some savings. And those are some good things. Maybe there's something you need to buy that you've been putting off. Maybe you want to do something new that might be your new goal. Or you could up your savings, which is never a bad idea, unless you're really, skimping somewhere else. So that's what they're looking for on 2B2. So let's look at 2B3. This is track and record your actual income, expenses, and savings for 13 consecutive weeks, the same period that you budgeted for, using the forms in the back. Okay, so we also have a sample of that. And that is on page 21 of 21. So that's the very last one of the booklet that I've got anyway. And so for this particular scout, they were recording it in June of 2020. And so for week 1, they spent $8.50 for a movie with friends. And so then they had originally had a balance of $15. They spent that, so then they had $6.50 left. Then they bought some food at lunch at school for $4.25, which dropped them down to a balance, or the cash they have available, at $2.25. Then they worked three hours at their restaurant job that earned them $18. So now the balance is up to $20.25. And then they got some allowance from mom of $5, and it came up to $25.25. So you basically can see how this is working. The $15 was the beginning amount that they had in their wallet or their piggy bank or your checking account, whatever cash means they were using. And then every time they spent something, that was a subtraction. And every time they got money in, that was in addition to that running balance. So you're going to do the same sort of thing. So the way to think about this is, you might do it by keeping receipts. You might just keep, if you've got a phone that has some way you can record what you're spending and what you're making, that might be a way to record it. You might just have a little notebook that you write down when you spend something, write down when you get something in. But keep that information, whatever system you choose to use. I personally use a checkbook. I'm kind of old school that way, that I can keep track of in and out that way. It is a little complex because I also then have cash, and I don't do it with that. But you just need a system. So that's my message to you at this juncture with the requirements. Is this is a great way to do it, and I think you're going to learn a lot about yourself as you do that. As I've seen a lot of scouts logs of income expenses, some of them, particularly the older boys, had after-school jobs but they also had a lot of expenses from that fast food restaurant that just happened to be right next to their school. So that is no accident. If there's a McDonald's or a Freddy's or a Pizza Ranch or a Taco Bell or a Sonic or any other restaurant like that, it's no accident they're right parked next to a school, because they know they're going to get the crowd. And so one of the scouts, I recall, he had a pretty good chunk of income he was making every week at his restaurant job, but he was spending $8, $9 almost every day at one of those restaurants near his school. So those are some of the things that you're going to probably pick up. You're going to probably find out, as if you didn't already know, if you're a spender or if you're a saver. And if you have money in your pocket, if you're ready to spend it right away, or if you want to hang on to it. And this is going to be a great exercise for doing just that and figuring that out. So let's drop back to the last portion of requirement 2, and that is 2B4. Compare your budget and your actual income and expenses to understand where your budget worked and when it did not. With your merit badge counselor, discuss what you might do differently next time. And so I really wish we could have that conversation, and you're going to be needing to have it with however we're recording the data or reporting your requirements that are achieved through this online process. So do a good job of keeping track of that information, and it will serve you well on learning how your money comes in and how it goes out. And then we'll get ready for requirement 3. Now we're ready for looking at requirement 3 on personal management. And this section is a little bit different because there are 8 different things we're going to talk about. But you only need to record your answer for 5 of those. But I encourage you to maybe jot down just a little bit on the ones that you don't consider part of your 5. So let's look at what those are. There's just a bunch of different topics about money. And the first one is the emotions you feel when you receive money. So I would guess for most people, there's kind of an excitement or a happiness aspect that goes to receiving money. For some folks, it might be immediately, how am I going to spend it? And others, it might be, how am I going to save it for maybe using it for later? And something everywhere in between. So that's kind of what we're looking at on that one. So you can think of yourself, are you a person that is a saver, or a money burns a hole in your pocket and it has to go out immediately? That's something for you to be aware of about yourself. Because it will impact your shopping for your life. So that's kind of what we have for item A. So let's look at B. Your understanding of how the amount of money you have with you affects your spending habits. So let's just say you have $5 in your pocket and you're out and about with friends. I would imagine that you're tempted to use that $5 for maybe some junk food or something at a convenience store, a Slurpee or a soda pop or some chips or maybe a burger, something like that for a small amount. But how does that change if you have something larger? Say you were given $100 from grandma for Christmas and you have that with you. Does that make you want to spend that on something? Or do you feel that urge to save it because it's a larger amount and it can be combined with other money later on for something very sizable? So think about how that impacts you and might affect your spending habits. And if you had the $100, would you still spend some on a Slurpee and junk food, or would you just try to save all of that, or maybe a combination? All right, let's look at C. There's 2 parts to this one. The first is your thoughts when you buy something new and your thoughts about the same item 3 months later. And then explain the concept of buyer's remorse. So you bought something new. Let's just say you got a new video game, and instead of a physical game, you got it online these days. And you played it and you went through all the levels and you had fun with it, but now you're done, and so it's sort of like not so interesting anymore because you're not going to go back at the beginning and play it all again. And so it was great for while it lasted, and now it's kind of done and old news. Something else that might be, say you got a new phone and you're just as much in love with it 3 months later as you are when you first got it. And you figured out more things about it, and you love it. Let's contrast that with maybe, say you bought a used car and you thought it was going to be great when you first got it. It was cool, it was working great, but then you had some repair problems with it, or you discovered that it didn't really meet your needs as much as you thought it was going to. And so that's sort of the concept of buyer's remorse in the second box, where you think it's going to be great and then you discover all of its flaws as time goes on. Or it has something breaks on it and then suddenly it needs repair, or it doesn't, or it's kind of one of those things where it isn't repairable and you end up throwing it away. So that's what buyer's remorse is. So remorse is sadness after time. Let's look at D, how hunger affects you when shopping for food items, for snacks and groceries. So it's always a wise thing to take a list when you go to the grocery store, because when you don't, you tend to overbuy. That's just what most people do. Maybe not you, but most people do that. So if you're hungry and you don't have a list, and you have money to spend, you're probably going to tend to buy more snack food and junk food than wholesome food, and you aren't really going to have a plan on what the food is that you're going to need to buy to make that dish that you're planning for this week. So if you have a recipe in mind that you're making, then you can go and be sure that you've got all the ingredients for that. There's nothing more frustrating than trying to cook something and realizing, oh, I'm missing this, and I have to make a run to the store to cover that. So the tendency is when you're hungry, you're going to buy the things that are quick to eat, the chips, the thing you can pull right out of the box, like cookies or something. Probably not vegetables and fruits or meat or other dairy products. So that's kind of the idea on D, is how hunger affects you, because you're definitely going to buy more when you're hungry. Let's look at E, your experience of an item you have purchased after seeing or hearing advertisements for it. And then the second item, did the item work as well as advertised? So let's just pretend you bought some sort of electronics, maybe say a laptop, and it works pretty much how you thought. There's a few little kinky things with it that you didn't expect, little quirks and whatever, but you know, primarily it does the job, and you're satisfied with it. You might have something else that is kind of a new thing, maybe not a commodity type thing like a phone or a laptop, some other techie thing, and you think it's going to be great and it just doesn't seem to measure up. And advertisements always put the best light on the item they're advertising. It has these features that works perfectly, there's no problems with it, it's very high quality. All of those things come out in advertisement. And then when you get it for real, it isn't always quite what you expect. So let's look at F, your understanding of what happens when you put money into a savings account. Now, we talked about this, I think, in the introduction, about what a savings account and a checking account was. And so when you put money into a bank, they consider that as deposited into your account. And so they keep track of what amount you've put in, and then you can access that and withdraw it at a later date. Now, during the time from when you deposit it and when you withdraw it, they're keeping a record of it, and they're providing you interest on most accounts. If after a certain minimum balance, the balance is what you have in the account, and they'll put interest on it, so it will gradually grow over time. And that is a service they're giving you for the benefit of you putting the money in their bank. Now, what they do with that money, since they're providing you that interest, they're also then using that money and combining it with everybody else's who's in the bank and loaning that out to other people who need it to buy cars or homes or start a business or go and get more education. those sort of things. And so they're combining that, and they're loaning that out with interest to the people who are getting the money. And so the interest rate that you're receiving from the bank might be, let's just say we're optimistic at this point, it's 1%. Well, it could be 5% that they're charging the people who have the loan. And so that difference of 4% is what the bank is making. That's how they stay in business. And then they can keep track of what money is in your account and have a facility so you can come in and withdraw money. That's how they stay in business. So you're getting a little bit of interest when you deposit, but if you get a loan, they're charging you interest of a higher amount. And that difference is their profit. All right, so let's look at, let's see, that was F of what happens with your money in the savings account. Let's look at G, charitable giving. Explain its purpose and your thoughts about it. So this is kind of a personal one, but charitable giving is when you decide to give money, or it could be an item, or it could be your time, but we're particularly in this one, we're looking at money that you give to a nonprofit organization. So a nonprofit has some service or role that they're trying to fulfill in the community or in the world to do some sort of good thing. So Boy Scouts of America is or BSA is a nonprofit organization. You can donate money to BSA. Other nonprofit organizations are things like a church, a food bank in your community, the PTA for a school, the Humane Society, the House of Neighborly Service. All of those sort of organizations are called nonprofits, and so their purpose is not to make a profit. They're not selling something, but they're doing work in the community that's needed, and people donate money to them and their time and sometimes items to fulfill that goal. So that's what charitable giving is. And so explain its purpose and thoughts about it. So once you start having some income, whether it's through odd jobs or a regular job, weekly job, it's a good thing to start thinking about charitable giving. Now, I, as a Christian, take the Bible seriously, and that the Bible recommends a tithe, which is a 10% amount, and so that's something that I do in giving back to my church as well as other organizations in the community. So you can also give your time and your talents. So your time is just maybe you're helping with a project that organization's doing, and a talent might be a particular skill, such as say you're really good with construction work and you can do electrical or plumbing or something like that. That could be very useful for a nonprofit who has a building. You could also say you're giving cash to them, or you're giving, say, an item that has value that they can resell in some way or use for their nonprofit. So I would highly encourage you, as you start making more money, to be very serious about charitable giving and find something that touches your heart, whatever it might be. For me, it's my church and a bunch of other different organizations. But if you can donate money and also your time and talents to those, that is a very valuable thing, both for a personal kind of life fulfillment and as well as helping out that organization and their purpose. And let's look at the last one, H. What can you do to better manage your money? Well, this kind of ties into the charitable giving, because I kind of mentioned the time, talents, and treasure for donating. But when you think about money management, you can really think of it in three different categories. I'm spending something, I'm saving it, or I'm giving it. So charitable giving is the giving it. The saving is sort of saving and investing to grow your money. And then the spending it is on daily expenses and long-term purchases you'd like to make. So I've also heard it as save, share, and spend. So the three S's: save, share, and spend. And kind of balance between those three things on how you're going to delegate your money across those different items. So now we're ready to look at requirement 4 in personal management, and this requirement begins to look at savings and investing. So in item A, the difference between saving and investing, including reasons for using one over the other. So let's kind of go back to what we talked about in the beginning. That first you have the cash and the working money, and when you have enough of that to meet your daily expenses, then you have a savings account that has money in it for emergencies and for larger purchases that you're planning. So once you get that savings amount to a place that you're comfortable with, and this is going to vary depending on where you're at in life. If you're a teenager, you obviously don't need a huge amount of savings unless maybe you're saving for a car. But when your parents are thinking about savings, they're thinking on a larger scale because they have more concerns, such as maybe multiple cars in the family, your home, your education, and other responsibilities that they may have. And so what is considered a comfortable amount for savings for them is going to be probably quite a bit more than what savings is for you. So once you've gotten that amount that you're comfortable with for savings, then you can invest. And so extra money can go to some investments. And the purpose of those are to actually grow your money, because you don't anticipate that you're going to need it in the near future or even maybe a couple of years out. And so it can be put into something for a longer stretch, and the purpose is to grow that money. So it typically is going to have a riskier investment, and the anticipation for growth is going to be higher. And some things that you might use for investing are stocks or mutual funds or bonds or some other different items that we'll talk about in the next requirement in number 5. So the third box here, you kind of defined what savings and investing were. So the reasons for using one over the other. So think of it as the 3 phases. Got to have some cash, got to have some savings, and when I've got those 2 covered nicely, then I can invest. And you really need to get those first 2 in place before you can really get into the investment point. All right, so that covers A. Let's look at B, the concept of return on investment and risk and how they're related. So I kind of just briefly touched on this, is that when we're investing, we expect a return. That's the growth in the money that we put towards it. And for an investment, we expect that to be higher than, say, from a bank account that gives us interest. Now, when I'm doing this video, interest rates are historically quite low right now. It might be a fraction of a % for a savings account. And that's not going to make you a whole lot of money. But you would hope that if you're a wise investor, using other things like the stocks and bonds and mutual funds will give you a higher return. And that's more growth on your particular money that you put towards it. So for a higher risk, you expect more return, and if for a lower risk, you would expect a lower return. And so that's the return on your investment. So what I would consider to be a lower risk thing would be, say, a stock such as maybe a Walmart or Pepsi or Kroger stores or Ford or Apple stock. Any of those kind of household names tend to be lower risk. They may not make you as much as you might want, but they're probably all going to be around for a while, and those would be a lower risk, and probably also, depending on the one, maybe a little lower return. A higher risk stock would be something more of a gamble. Maybe a new technology, a company that's working on something brand new, or a drug company that's working on the next big medicine. Those are going to have potentially a much higher return, but also you could lose all your money in that too. And so with investing, there is that risk that if the stock, the company doesn't perform, you could lose your complete investment. That's different from those savings account at a bank, which your investment or your amount you put into the bank is quite safe and it's federally insured. So let's look at C. the concept of simple interest and compound interest. And so you really don't see simple interest around anymore. That's basically, you calculate the interest for your deposit once a year, you get a lump sum at the end, and it's a very simple calculation. Compound interest, on the other hand, is they're continually putting the interest that has been accrued back into the principal, and so it's recalculated every day, and so your principal is gradually getting bigger as time goes by, and so therefore you do make more money. Now, in our low interest rates of today, it's not going to be a whole lot, but if interest rates were, say, 5 or 6%, like they have been at previous times in our history, that could make a big difference in the amount of interest that you would accrue. So simple interest is one-time calculation, compound is repeatedly, and that's typically what everything's going to be today. So let's look at D, the concept of diversification in investing. So I would recommend that, particularly when you get started in investing, you diversify, and that is, the root word is diversification, which is a number of different types of things. So some of them are low risk, some of them are higher risk, with the purpose of giving you what's called a balanced portfolio. It's kind of a big word, but it means that you're kind of dabbling in a lot of different things, hoping that something will do really well and that all of them will do okay. And if one investment is bad, the others will make up for the loss in that particular thing. So diversification might be diversifying in a lot of different stocks in different segments of our U.S. economy, such as maybe you're investing in food companies in one area, you're investing in car companies and in technology, in healthcare, in communications, all those different areas to diversify your stocks and your investments. So now let's look at the last item on requirement 4, which is item E. Why is it important to save and invest for retirement? Well, my hope for all of you is that even though you're a teenager now, that you make it to retirement age. And what a lot of folks have for goals in retirement is they've got a lot more time than they had before, possibly when they were working. And so they want to be able to use what money they've saved and fulfill some lifelong dreams. Maybe that's traveling, or being able to do some project that's important to them, or some charitable work, or whatever it might be. See their kids more often. And so they want to have that money available to be able to do those things. And so if you start saving at a young age and let it grow over time, you can start accumulating a fair amount of wealth to be able to do those projects in retirement, and then also take on probably some more healthcare needs as you get older, that you end up needing money for that as well. So the way to look at this is, early in your life, when you don't need that money for retirement yet, you're putting your money into more risky things in the purpose of saving for retirement. And then as time goes by and you get closer to retirement, the amount of risk that you're willing to assume is less. So higher risk at the beginning because there's going to be more return, remember? And then as you get lower risk, there's less return, but you're also much closer to retirement. And then it's much more stable and you can plan better on what you're going to have. So an easy way to save for retirement is, particularly if you end up working for a larger company. Most larger companies are going to have some sort of 401k plan, or you can also open an IRA. And a 401k with an employer will have some sort of plan where you can put some of your wages towards that 401k, and then you don't even realize that you've earned that money. It's just set aside. Each paycheck goes into that account, and it then is invested into stocks and bonds and mutual funds, or whatever the plan is for your employer. And you don't even really realize how much you're saving. But quite a bit of wealth can accumulate over time with those sort of investments. And the stock market over time has done well to make that happen. So that's a really easy way to do it, but then you can also open an IRA, or just have investments such as maybe real estate or getting your house paid off, or just savings accounts, money market accounts that can work towards that goal of retirement. So I think that completes requirement 4. So we'll move on to 5. Okay, it looks like we're ready for number 5. Explain to your merit badge counselor what the following investments are and how each works. All right, so let's start with A, which is common stocks. We touched on this earlier, but a common stock is related to a specific company. So we mentioned companies like PepsiCo or Coca-Cola or Walmart, Target, Kroger, Intel, Advanced Micro Devices. All of those sorts of companies have a stock associated with them. And when people invest in the stock, the company can use that money for developing new products and entering new markets and doing new things. So each of those stocks are traded on what is called a stock exchange. And so, for instance, there's the New York Stock Exchange, and you can buy a stock or sell your stock through what's called a brokerage firm that manages your purchases and sales and works with that stock exchange. So, for instance, brokerage houses are things like E-Trade or Edward Jones, Oppenheimer Funds, Fidelity Investments, or newer ones like Robinhood. Most all of them now can be done, you can do the trades online, and you can see all your account information online. And there will be people there that can help you do those sort of things. But you're, in essence, picking what you're going to invest in and how much you want to put into it when you buy and when you sell. So the risk is really all on you. You're deciding what you want to buy and sell and if you've made a profit. So the goal is to make a profit, and if you hold a stock for longer than a year's time, when it comes time to sell it and you've made some profit, your taxes are less because you have what's called a long-term capital gain versus a short-term capital gain if you sell it within a year's time. And so the purpose of that is to have people not try to be day traders and try and make a quick buck on the stock exchange by selling and buying quickly, but to hold on to them and to invest for a longer term in these different stocks, and then they pay less tax at the end. So those are what common stocks are. Now let's contrast that by B, which is mutual funds. So the way a mutual fund is those same brokerage houses, Edward Jones and Fidelity and those, will have people that are fund managers. And those fund managers manage a large pool of money that people have invested in their mutual fund. And then they buy a large set of stocks for that mutual fund. And those managers are buying and selling and trading and working with that fund all the time to have good growth over time. And so they're sort of the expert of doing that stock trading, more so than what you or I might be able to do. Now, they're an expert, but that doesn't mean that they're good at it. They can be surprised just like the rest of us. And so generally they do pretty well, but not always. And so in this mutual fund, you would put your money into it and then let the fund manager do it. They also will charge you some fees called loads on the buying end of it to pay for their services for managing the fund. And there might be some recurring fees as well, or some on the sale. So that's what a mutual fund is. And as far as when you should, you want to do, you've done your cash, you've done your savings for emergencies and for big purchases, and now you're ready to invest. And so maybe mutual funds is the first place to go because you do have this fund manager helping you. Or you could do common stocks. Both are a good choice, but the common stocks might be a little riskier unless you really are confident about it. Mutual funds are a good choice though. Now one thing you'll hear from people over time is they'll offer their stock picks, for example, and they say, oh, this is a great stock, it's going to go up, something's wonderful about it. The stock market and then hence mutual funds are driven greatly by what's happening in the news, how people feel. It isn't necessarily exactly what financially they're doing. A lot of it is an emotional reaction to what's going on, and if this company is perceived as a hot company, and what their price is relative to their earnings, and how much stock is outstanding, all of those sort of things play into it. So those are two good areas where you can invest and make quite a bit of money. So stocks and mutual funds. Then we kind of switch gears on C, which is life insurance. Now, life insurance generally is purchased when you're an adult for people who depend on you. So, for instance, someone who is working in the family, like a husband or a wife, might buy life insurance in case they were to die, the life insurance policy would pay out to the other spouse or to dependent children. And so that's a way to make sure that those people who depend on you are taken care of after you would die. So that's the primary purpose of life insurance. And there's really two types, whole life insurance and term life insurance. Term life is a set amount of time that you can have the policy. It's lower cost, and you just buy it in case you die. Whole life, there's actually can be a savings component to it, and you can keep it longer than just a set time. So you will die sometime, so if you keep it up, it will pay out eventually. And if you try to withdraw the savings piece of the whole life policy, there's some tax savings that you can do with that as well. So that's the life insurance item for C. Now let's look at D, which is the certificate of deposit. Now this is also purchased at a bank, kind of like your savings and checking account. But the difference with a CD, or certificate of deposit, is that you lock in your deposit for a set amount of time. So for instance, let's just say you have $10,000 and you say, you know what, I don't need that $10,000 for a while. I want to get a CD and you can have it for a year's time. Well, when you do that, you allow the bank to be sure they've got it for that time, and then they give you a higher interest rate. So whereas you might be like less than 1% for just a general savings account, it might be 1% or a little more for a CD, depending on how much you're investing. And if you invest for a longer period of time, the interest rate should be better because you are committing to a longer period of time. So more time, higher interest rate; less time, lower interest rate. And one way you can kind of use this to your advantage, because you aren't going to have access to that money during that time. So if something came up that you need a new car, you need that money, well, you can pay a penalty to get access to it. That's not a good thing. But you could also do something where if you have enough money, you could do, say you bought a CD this quarter, and then you buy another CD the next quarter, and then another the next quarter. So every 3 months, you're buying a CD, and they all have a year-long cycle. So as one is maturing, another one you're starting, and another 3 months later, another one's maturing, so you'd have access to that money at that time. So that could be one way to have these rolling maturity dates that can give you access to that money. All right, so let's look at 5E. What's a savings account? So we've talked about this from time to time. Savings account is at a bank. It's a small amount of interest, but they do give you some interest. And it is a very safe investment, just like the certificate of deposit is a safe investment from a bank. Those are federally insured, so the government is insuring that through a company known as FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So that insures your money. So if the bank should go under, you should be able to get that money back. So the last one is 5F, and that's a U.S. savings bond. This is a little bit different thing. It is sold by a bank, and you are actually putting money into it towards the U.S. government, so they can do what they need to do for government activity. and it should have a higher interest rate than what the normal savings or checking account would have at a bank or a CD. And you are locked into it for a period of time. Now, I haven't bought any of these for a very long time. I remember buying them at the bank when I was a kid. You'd buy a savings bond it had a face value of $25, and maybe you paid $17 or $18 for it. But then you had to keep it for 7 years, and then you could redeem it. And if you kept it longer, then the interest was accumulating all that time, and so they had some way of calculating what that was worth. So it was a good investment at that time, but you should be checking into what the rates are and whether that makes sense for you before investing in one of those. So those are the different ways of investing your money. Okay, now we're ready for 6, which says, explain to your counselor why people might purchase the following types of insurance and how they work. So this is a new requirement for this revision of the personal management book. We've never done insurance on here before, but this is a good one to add because if you have, for instance, for a automobile, if you want to drive, you will need to have insurance for you as a driver. So if you have an accident, you are going to be covered by your insurance policy for the damage you've caused to other people's cars or property or to their health by physical injury. So when you buy insurance of any type, you pay what's called a premium, and that's the fee for getting that insurance. And then if you have a claim, it's called, such as you have an accident, the insurance company will pay most, but not necessarily all of it. They will require you to pay a little bit up front first, which is called the deductible. And so that varies depending on what type of policy you get. If you have a higher deductible, which means you pay more if you should have an accident, then your policy is going to cost you less. If you have a smaller deductible, typically your policy will then cost you quite a lot more. So that's really what is happening with automobile insurance, and there are different pieces of it. There's different portions of it that are for liability for you as the driver, and there's comprehensive and collision, and so when you need insurance, those are things that you'll want to pay attention to for the amounts that you have in your policy for each of those different categories. Okay, let's look at health insurance. Now this is for you having, say, cancer, or you need to have surgery, or some other, or, dental insurance, medical insurance, all of those type of claims for your health. And so it pays your medical bills, but just like with automobile, there's a deductible, and higher deductible, the lower the premium price. And oftentimes you'll get health insurance through an employer. That's a benefit of working for an employer, that they cover some of that, and then some of it you pay for as well from your pay. That's health insurance. 6C is homeowners or renters insurance. So these are kind of two different things, depending on if you own the property, the building, or if you are just renting it from someone else. So if you have homeowners insurance, that means that you own the home, and the insurance that you're going to get is going to cover the contents of the home and also the building itself. Versus renters insurance, where you're renting from, say, an apartment complex, and they have the insurance on the building, and you have the insurance on just your contents in the apartment. So depending on how much stuff you have, that may or may not make sense to have. And maybe the apartment complex might require you to have a renter's insurance that you'd have to check into. But that's kind of the difference between those two. And different types of loss you might have in an apartment or a home would be a fire, flood, a tornado, big winds, hurricanes, earthquakes, or theft. And so depending on your area, like for instance, earthquake might cost you additional money if you lived in, say, California, where earthquakes are fairly common. And if you lived in a floodplain, for example, in a very low area that tends to flood, you might have to pay more for that kind of insurance. So it's all worked into the policy that you would buy. And then the fourth one here, D, is whole life and term life. And we touched on that earlier, and I don't have a whole lot more to say about that, other than whole life. You can keep the policy active for as long as you live, and then it will guarantee pay you out at the end if you kept it active. And it is going to cost you quite a lot more. Term life, on the other hand, is set for a certain amount of time. It might be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and you can only have it for that period of time. And then any premiums you put into that policy basically are gone, because you aren't going to get a payout at the end because you're still alive. But that's a good thing. So that's the way to think about that for term and whole life. Now we're ready for number 7, and that says, explain to your merit badge counselor the following. So 7A is what a loan is, what interest is, and how the annual percentage rate, or APR, measures the true cost of a loan. So first, what is a loan? Well, you probably have loaned something to a friend or gotten something loaned to you, and there's the expectation that you will give it back to them. So you loan someone a pencil, or you get a library book loaned to you. Those are all things that do get returned in the end. Same thing with a loan, but this time it's for money. So you might get money you borrow money in a loan to, say, buy a home, to buy a car, to further your education, maybe to pay for college, or someday you want to start a business. All of those things, you might not have the money that you need to start or buy those things, and so you get a loan. And that's a great way for people to be able to own homes and own cars when they don't have all the money. But the drawback of that is that you do have to pay it back, and you have to pay interest on that. And so that's the second box, is what is interest. And so it's basically the fee that you pay for the benefit of receiving their money to buy the car or the house or build your business. So it can vary greatly depending on the type of loan that you get, but it is a way for you to move forward. So that's what interest is. And the third box is what is an annual percentage rate? And how does that capture the full cost of the loan? So you might have seen ads or sales that say low interest rates. Well, that's great if that's all that is that you're going to be having to pay in addition to the money back. But there might be some hidden fees associated with it, or other costs of completing the sale. And so in doing so, an APR, or an annual percentage rate, kind of normalizes everything and brings in those extra fees and other costs so that you can compare apples to apples from one loan to another loan and what it's really going to cost you. So let's look at 7B, the different ways to borrow money. So there's a lot of different places that you can borrow money from. The obvious is the bank. They've got your checking, savings, CDs, money market accounts there, and so they're in the business of loaning out money. So that's an obvious choice. But you can also borrow money from family members. They might think that, you know what, you're good to buy a car, and so I'm going to loan you the money and you will pay me back on a certain schedule for that service. You could also, if you're buying a car, you could buy it from a particular dealership, and they have a company and organization that handles their loans, and so you actually get a loan from them, and that's specific to the car dealership. You could buy a home or a car and have owner financing, that they will then sell it back to you over time and have an agreement in writing to explain what the terms are and what you're expected to do and what happens if you don't pay it back. So you could do owner financing on something. And you could also look on the internet. There are different ways you can borrow money on the internet. And then, of course, you don't normally think of this, but using a credit card is actually getting a loan, because you swipe your credit card for something, you bought something, but you haven't actually put any money towards that yet. But there is the expectation that you will be paying your bill at some later date. And if you don't, the interest rate for a credit card is actually quite high. And so you really do want to pay that back quickly. So now we're going to take a look at 7C. And there are 5 different boxes to this and a ton of information. So be sure to be ready to write down as I go through these. The first 3 are 3 different types of cards, known as charge cards, debit cards, and credit cards on your form. But let me first say, before we get into this, that each of these cards are a piece of plastic. They all basically look the same to an outside observer. But just for your protection, because a lot of them have a magnetic or a little chip in them now, and some scammers try to pass by people in stores and pick up that information off their chip. That it's a good idea to, in your wallet or some sort of card holder, that you have an FRID shielding type wallet or card. A lot of times it'll be mentioned on the wallet, but that's a good way to protect you from fraud just by being out in a public area. So wanted to get that in there first before I forgot about it. Okay, so let's look at these 3 different types of cards. Now the first one is a little confusing. It's called a charge card. And if you'd asked me what a charge card was 30 years ago, I would have said it would be like a store credit card, like a J.C. Penney card or a Sears card. Those were the big cards in the day. Those have kind of gone away. Think of them more as a store credit card. What I'm going to call this one, though, is like a prepaid Visa card or a prepaid gift card for some store, or just a prepaid MasterCard. So we're going to call that the first item, then the debit card, and then the credit card. So let's look at all of these different cards for what they are, how much fraud risk there is, what happens if they're lost or stolen, is there any interest charged to you for them, other costs or benefits of them, and if you have a problem with self-control, is that a good card for you or not? And then what my advice would be. So let's look at each of these. Let's start with that charge card. So this is the prepaid Visa. And so that's really what it is. It's a card that you put money onto it at the store. So you might buy the card at a Walmart or a Target or something like that, a Kroger store, and you pay, say, $105 for the $100 card. So they charge you a fee up front. But it's just your card, and it's really like money, but on a piece of plastic. And so your name isn't on that card. It is reloadable. You can put more money on it. There's more fees to do that. But if you lose it, it's just gone. You could maybe keep a record of the number on it, and maybe be able to contact them and get some money back on it. But most likely, if you lose it, it's just gone. So that's the risk of lost for that particular card. Now, you put money on it at the beginning, so they're not going to charge you any interest on money you've already put onto it. So there's no interest that's charged on that particular card. But there's that upfront fee. And so if you are not particularly good about self-control on spending money, this might be an okay card for you, because once you tap out the $100 that's on it, you can't spend anymore. You can always reload it, but you have to have money to do that. So it's not going to get you in debt using something like this. And so if you don't have a lot of self-control, that might be the card for you. The fees, though, are quite high. So a lot of times it's used by scammers to try to get people to, if they're being defrauded, they'll want you to get one of these cards and then give them the number on it, and then they basically extract all the money off of it. There's a couple different versions of that, like a green dot card and some other ones that scammers like to use. So that's kind of the risk of these. People who kind of want to work underneath the radar of society, don't want any tracking, will often use this sort of card. Okay, so let's look at a typical debit card. That's our second box. And a debit card is a same piece of plastic that is attached to your checking and savings account. So when you swipe it to buy something, that amount is deducted from your account. So there is no risk of, or there is no interest charged to you, because it's coming directly out of your account. Now, I would strongly recommend, if you have trouble keeping track of the PIN number for your card, You've got to learn to memorize it, or at least keep it very far away from the card itself. A relative of mine had her PIN number on her card. It got stolen, and her bank account was drained down to zero. And the police had a picture of the thief, and because credit card fraud is so rampant, it's very difficult for them to prosecute or try to find them. So that was a hard lesson for her. But don't keep the PIN on it, because that's basically the path into your card. And the banks that are tracking cards now are doing a better job with finding that sort of fraud happening if your card's been stolen. But if it is stolen, you have to really identify it quickly and call your bank. They aren't perfect yet about that, but because sometimes you still have your card, but someone's gotten the number off of it. That happened to my husband. And so fortunately, the credit union that was attached to the card identified it before he did. And so they stopped it, and they were very helpful. But and they did not have any charges on his account because it was fraud. But it's still a little more risky than some other different types. So there's no interest. There's really no other card. They usually don't charge you any fee for having a debit card. And you are spending your own money. So if you have no self-control, you're just taking your own money and spending it. So you might want to avoid this if you can get a credit card. That might be a better choice if you have self-control and you can get a credit card. So that's kind of the whole debit card that's attached to a bank. Now the third type is a credit card, and this is a different one. You're actually getting a loan. The other two had money backed behind them. This one, you're just spending money on the credit card's money. So you swipe it, and they keep a tally of what you've been charging, and then they send you a bill at the end of the month. And so they expect you to pay your bill, but they will give you a minimum charge or a minimum fee or a minimum amount you have to pay each month. It might be $20, it might be $50, depending on what it is, how much of a bill you've got. But if you only make the minimum payment, you are going to be paying on that card for a very long time. And the interest rates that they charge for a balance that continues from month to month is in the neighborhood of 14% up to 28% if you've got a lot of debt already. And so credit cards are not a great thing if you have no self-control. If you want to just keep spending, you might need to just cut them up and go back to one of the other two methods, preferably the debit card instead of credit card. There might be an annual fee on the card. Usually it's not that much, maybe 20 or 50 bucks. You can get points on it though. That can be a benefit of credit cards, because what happens when you use a credit card, the credit card company charges the business around 2 to 3%, somewhere about there, for each transaction that they process. So that's how the credit card company makes their money. So they're doing it on each fee, and they want people to pay their bills off, so then they keep having money coming in and paying for that, and then they keep that 2 or 3% off the top. The businesses like it because they're assured of getting payment, even though it might be 4 to 6 weeks later, but they do get payment. So you can kind of see the pros and cons for it. They want you to charge, but you do need to pay it. So when someone defaults on it, that's very hard on the credit card companies. But the points are nice, so you can rack up, whether it's flight miles or whatever type of card gives you points, and use those for purchases at the store or travel or whatever. And so I would recommend only using a credit card if you are really good about self-control on your spending, and you can pay it off every month. Because if you can't pay it off every month, you shouldn't be using that type of card, because it's just going to cost you a lot. Over the span of the card, why would you want to buy a meal now and then pay for it 3 times later because you've never paid it off? That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that's kind of the scoop on the 3 different types of cards. So now we got 2 more questions to ask. What are the costs and pitfalls of using these financial tools? So prepaid Visa was that upfront 5%. Debit card didn't have any percentage charge to it, but it is using your own money and there's a little bit more risk than a credit card. And a credit card, you can overspend and be paying a very high interest rate if you can't pay it off. And then the last box, explain why it is unwise to make only the minimum payment on your credit card. Well, if you're doing that, you're running a balance every month and you're going to be paying, 14, 18, 28% interest potentially. And that's exorbitant interest. But you're basically getting a loan from the credit card company, and you've agreed to that when you sign up for the card. So buyer beware, and use the one that matches your style of working. If you have no self-control, use a debit card or a prepaid Visa. If you do, credit cards are a great option. I use a credit card all the time. I also pay it off every month. So hopefully that makes sense, and let's move on to the next one. Okay. So let's look at 7D, credit reports and how personal responsibility can affect your credit report. So the first box is, what is a credit report? Well, a credit report sort of is a financial summary of your life. How much you have out already in loans, such as the credit cards you already have in your name, any outstanding loans, those sort of things come to be on your credit report. And there are 4 different credit reporting agencies in the U.S., 3 big ones and 1 small one. They go by names like TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. So those companies or organizations gather all of our Americans' credit information and record that. And then if, say, a credit card company wants to issue a credit card, they can check your credit report with them to see if you're a good risk. And also a credit report might be used, say, for a bank on if you should get a loan for a house. But it also might be checked for you getting a job, for getting some insurance. So it actually is a much bigger thing than just to borrow money. So you definitely want to keep it in a good state. And so the next box is, how does personal responsibility affect your credit report? Well, if you have loans and you haven't paid them back, that obviously is a problem. If you're late on, say, paying your bills, that can show up on your credit report. If you have too much money loaned out, if you seem like you're extended beyond what you should be for how much you earn, that's kind of a red flag. And so the credit reporting agencies sort of conglomerate all this information and give you what's known as a credit score. And there are different ranges that are good credit score or bad credit score. And so when you do want to get a loan, if you have a good credit score, you have the potential of having a lower interest rate than if your credit is not so good. So those are what is under credit report in D. So let's look at E, ways to eliminate or reduce debt. Well, the best way is to not get in debt in the first place. And as Scouts, you shouldn't have any, or if you do have some, maybe for a car loan, not much at this point. So I would encourage you to be very careful in your future on getting into debt. Try to live so that you don't have to get in debt, and when you do, that you have a plan on paying it back. But ways to reduce your debt, there are a number of ways. Let's just say that you have a house payment for your home, and it's $1,000 a month. And you say, well, I've got some extra money. I'm going to pay $1,500 on this payment, and that extra $500 will work to reduce the length of my loan and pay off things earlier. And so if you continually do that when you have some extra funds, that will dramatically reduce how long you're going to be paying on that loan. Same for a car or other loans as well. So definitely worth something to consider. And just like kind of not getting in debt in the first place or reducing debt, if you're using a credit card as a means of a loan, you might have to cut it up, and so that you can't use it again. Because credit card interest is so high, just making the minimum payment is going to be a problem. So those are some ways to consider, and just anything you can do to bring you more income to pay that debt down is going to be to your advantage. Now we're ready for requirement 8 on personal management. And up until this point, everything that we've done in personal management has been related to money management. Now we're finally moving on. So now this next one, in number 8, is all about time management. So there's 4 different requirements, A, B, C, and D, and each of them are going to have an aspect of time management. So the first one, item A, write a to-do list of tasks or activities, such as homework assignments, chores, personal projects that must be done in the coming week. List these in order of importance. So these are things that are not necessarily time related. Not in the sense that it's the time for your scout meeting and that you have to be there at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night or something like that. It's going to be, I have to prep something for the scout meeting, but it's not going to be the meeting itself. So it's going to be, what are your homework assignments for school right now? Do you have a chore list that you need to feed the dog and maybe load the dishwasher or help a parent with a task around the house? So you're going to write all these different things down in a list and prioritize them, putting the most important things at the top. So make sure that you've got some things, and if you don't think you have any items that you have to do, I'm sure that a parent can help you find something that you do need to put on your to-do list. I live by to-do lists. That's the way I keep track of all the different tasks I need to do. And I feel it it's very encouraging to me to be able to cross one off that I got one finished. So I hope that that works for you too. Okay, let's look at B. Make a 7-day calendar schedule. Put in your set of activities, such as school classes, sports practices or games, jobs or chores, and of course your scout or place of worship or club meetings. Then plan when you will do all the different tasks from your to-do list between your sets of activities. Okay, so first off, get a calendar of some sort. It can be a calendar you hang on the wall. It can be a small notebook sort of calendar. It can be a calendar in your phone. Any of those things, and then block off in probably hour-long chunks or hour-and-a-half chunks, whatever makes sense, when you have different things you need to do, such as, 10 o'clock on Sunday morning we're at church, so 10 to, let's say, 11:30, that's a block. And then on Monday night or Monday during school, whatever time your hours are for school, get that blocked off until, say you get done at 3:30. Then you have space after 3:30 that day. Say your scout meeting is on Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, you block off from 7 to 8:30, let's say, for the scout meeting. And then you have another practice after school on Wednesday. Put that in there, all of your classes all the way across. Let's see what other activities here. School classes, sports practices. Let's say you have a job on Saturdays. And so put that in on Saturdays for whatever hours you worked. Okay. Get all of those time constraint items into the calendar first. And then in the gaps, when you're not necessarily traveling from one place to the other, or you just got home from somewhere, when you don't have those sort of things happening, then you've got a spot where you can get the homework done, get the chores done, prepare for, say, a meeting or for class. So get all that worked in, and I bet you'll be surprised at how many things that you can get done in a week when you do that sort of task. So look at that for 7 days. And then, now in C, follow that 1-week schedule you planned. Keep a daily diary or journal during each of the 7 days of the week's activities, writing down when you completed each task on your to-do list compared to when you scheduled them. So basically you're keeping a blank sheet of paper next to your calendar and your to-do list and just seeing how well did the plan match up with what actually happened. And note why perhaps something happened. So maybe something got canceled because of weather, or somebody in your family got sick and it threw everything for your family schedule, threw a wrench in all of that. Whatever it might be, or it worked great. Any of those things are possible, and then maybe you had to adapt because of the change that was required. So note that as kind of your log for item C. And then D, with your merit badge counselor, review your to-do list, the 1-week schedule, and your daily diary or journal to understand where your schedule worked and when it did not. So that we'll have to do outside of this video, of course, and so you'll hopefully have a way to talk through that with your counselor. And there are sample diaries and an example of someone doing that exercise in the back of the printed out worksheet. So you can refer to that and get an idea if you're struggling with that for any reason. But I think it's pretty straightforward. And then discuss what you might do differently next time. That's the one box on the sheet here. As you do more and more things, you kind of can get into a routine on how your time management goes. And maybe there's just a process that you follow in the morning before school, for example, that if I get up at this time, I can get this done, and this done, as well as get ready for school. Or after school is when I'm most efficient, and so I'm going to do it in these types of things at this particular time. Or in the evening I'm better, or I want to relax in the evening, whatever it might be for what works for you. Note that, and I think you'll learn a lot about yourself. Okay, now we're ready for requirement 9 in personal management, and it says prepare a written project plan demonstrating the steps, including the desired outcome. This is a project on paper, not a real-life project. Examples could include planning a camping trip, developing a community service project, or a school or religious event, or creating an annual patrol plan with additional activities not already included in the troop annual plan. Discuss your completed plan with your merit badge counselor. All right, so let's think about what could be some good projects here. They've already given us a number of examples that we can use. But I would suggest for those scouts out there who are seriously considering their Eagle project that you try to do something as close to that as possible to really get the wheels going in your mind on what it's going to entail and if it's the right size and scope for a project. You know, and a lot of Eagle projects involve some sort of construction or some sort of landscaping. So those would be a couple of really good ways to look at this. So let's look at A, define the project and what is your goal. So let's just say we're doing a landscaping project, and even if you haven't gotten something planned, let's just say that your family wants to do some landscaping project in the backyard. That maybe a fence needs to be replaced and you're going to replace some of the plants that have kind of overgrown or died, and you're going to do some new ground cover and put some plants in. So redo kind of a corner of your backyard. So define the project, that's really it. Defining the project is re-landscape the backyard, and our goal is to replace the fence, get the plants in, new ground cover. So let's look at B and C kind of together here, because I don't really like the order of this. B is develop a timeline for your project that shows the steps you must take from beginning to completion. And C is describe your project. And so part of me says, you know, we should describe the project before we determine the timeline, because that's going to basically tell us what our steps are. So let's look at that landscaping project. Well, there's maybe a broken fence there already. So so we've got to do some demolition. We've got to remove the parts of the fence that are broken, maybe save the pieces that are able to be reused, dig out the old plants that are there. We need to remove whatever ground cover might be there. There might be sprinkler system parts that need to be moved or fixed. Those sort of things are the first step to prepare the area for the new installation. So, so continuing to describe your project. Okay, so we've got the demo done. We've got kind of a clean slate now. So we need to figure out what plants are going to be going in. That's kind of probably in the design phase. We're designing the new area. Design of the fence, is it going to match what's already there? Are we going to do something different? Figuring that out. And then what is the landscape, the ground cover that we want to have? So those are some things on the design. And then there's the purchasing of the materials. And what are you going to do first? Well, maybe we should do the fence first and the sprinkler repair, and then get the plants in, get some, say some landscape fabric over the top, and say we're going to do bark or chips of wood chips, bark, or small stones. Any of those could be valuable landscape or ground covers. And so we've got to figure out what we're going to do. And then we've decided what we want to do, and then we've got to let reality set in and determine our, we'll be determining our budget. So let's describe our project and what we want to do. Okay, then look back at B again. Develop a timeline for your project that shows the steps you must take from beginning to completion. So we've sort of described everything. We're demoing, we're repairing, we're getting the fence put in, we're going to be buying new plants, we're going to do some mat, and then we're going to do some ground cover. So first step is, we live in a cold climate here. So it's November when I'm recording this, and let's just say we wanted to put new plants in. Well, new plants in November is a really bad idea. They will just die, and really they're not even available. The nurseries are kind of shut down now for the fall because it's just too cold to be putting plants in. You need to do that either in the spring or in the fall, ideally, but during the summer is okay too. It just requires maybe a little more effort on your part to keep them alive during the heat of the summer. So a landscape project like this could conceivably start in March, or you might want to start in September so that everything is in before it gets cold and snowy here. So that's a consideration for your timeline. You could start it in July, but it might not be an ideal time. Now, if you live in a warmer climate, you probably could do this sort of thing year-round. But there's probably better times and less ideal times for doing that. So that's part of your timeline considerations. And then the steps from beginning to completion. So let's just say we're going to start in late March, do the demo, have that done in 2 weeks' time. Then we're going to get our plants purchased. April's a great time to buy plants here. Get those in the ground and then get the mat over it. And let's just say by the end of May, we're going to have our whole project done. So that's the ideal timeline for what we want to do. Now, sometimes life gets in the way of that and other considerations happen. Usually May is a very busy month, and so maybe we've got some travels planned for graduation, for example, things that will impact our timeline. So those family concerns would need to be taken into consideration. And if you're looking for people to help you with your eco project, you need to consider particularly school schedules and troop schedules. If the troop has a camping trip planned for a weekend, that's going to be a problem on getting help to do your landscaping for an eco project. So those are all considerations to keep in mind for B. So we've described the project in as much detail as possible and then developed the timeline that matches for what we're capable of doing. All right, let's look at D now. Develop a list of resources. Identify how these resources will help you achieve your goal. So for a home project, we're going to need probably some assistance on the demo. Taking the fence apart probably is going to need some help maybe from siblings or parents. And then you're going to need some money to buy new materials to put in. So it's basically labor and materials, and so define that as best you can on what you're wanting to do. And then kind of look at that along with E. You might have a grand plan of what you want to put into this area. And if it's a large area, you probably want some trees, some bushes, maybe some flowers. Do you want annuals or perennials? All of those need to be considered because plants can get very expensive after a trip to the greenhouse or to a home store. So look at what you're wanting to do for the fence, the landscape materials, and to develop a budget. So the shopping trip is the way to do it, and reality might set in and you decide, you know what, I need to scale this back, or I'm going to do it in phases. So maybe I get the trees put in initially, and then next spring we'll do the plants and maybe some flowers and the additional landscape materials. So that really wraps up the project plan, and I hope that this starts to get the wheels turning. And then also, you know, you're going to have some bumps in the road that you're going to run across on this. And so I would encourage you to not consider those to be catastrophic. Think of those as learning experiences for you. That it's those bumps in the road that are really going to help you mature and really learn what project management's all about. And one more thought on this, because I am encouraging you to do this as an Eagle project. Let's just think about for a moment if we're working with a beneficiary. Because for doing an Eagle project, you've got to get the people you're going to benefit on board. Your scoutmaster, your committee chair, the regional representative for scouting, who's going to sign off on your project. And that has to all happen before you do one thing for actually implementing the project. So let's just say you found a project and you found your beneficiary, and you've been talking with them, and they've got some great plan that they want done, and that seems like a good Eagle project for you. That's when communication management really comes into play. Let's just say that the beneficiary has a couple of different projects, and you need to have a meeting with those folks. So it's having a meeting. It's ideal to have an agenda. What are you trying to accomplish in your meeting? And then as you go through the steps of meeting with your beneficiary, what do they see as what's going to happen? What's their expectations, and what is your expectation of what you can actually accomplish? That really falls into the same plan here and what we talked about with the backyard project. Then, as you're having this meeting and subsequent ones as you implement your project, you've got your agenda, you're talking about the different things that need to happen, and it's really important to, at that time when you're meeting, have someone, probably you, to write down the action item and who the owner is on that particular thing. So let's just say you were doing your backyard project and you're having, let's just say, a family meeting, and you discovered that there are some utility lines in the backyard that we're going to have to dodge when we're doing the backyard landscaping. And so maybe an action item would be, hey, Mom and Dad, I need you to contact the utility companies or a service that is often provided in your community to be able to mark where utilities are at before any digging happens. And so for your meeting with your beneficiary, that might be a project or an action item for your beneficiary to do. So keeping some notes, you're writing down an action item, get the utilities located, and the owner for that is the beneficiary, and the timeline on when they're going to have to do that. So by writing down these action items and owners, then you can keep track of things on the project that are key for keeping you on schedule. Without doing that, you're often going to find out that something didn't get done, and now you're in a rush to try to dig holes and you don't know where the utilities are at, and that's going to be a dangerous situation, or just is going to push out your project. So anytime you're meeting with a beneficiary, do action items, say owners, and any timeline that's involved, and then you as the project manager are going to need to follow up and make sure that those folks did those tasks, because it's going to impact things. So just my words of wisdom to you. I've seen that simple thing, action item, owner, timeline, help for work groups, for community clubs, for scout groups, and just for myself. And so I really recommend that you do that. It is a major shift in how we typically operate, and will definitely help keep your project on task. So good luck with that. And remember, you don't actually have to do this project. It's all up here and on paper here, and so just make the best of that. So now we're ready for requirement 10, which now we're in the area of career management. And as a high school student, or even late middle school, you're probably starting to think about what you might want to do after high school's over. So this is a great question, a requirement to really consider those aspects of what you might want to do after school is done. So A is choose a career you might want to enter after high school or college graduation. So I've had a large variety of different responses on this, from being an astronaut to being an engineer to being an auto mechanic to being a diesel mechanic to doing construction to being just all sorts of different things. So what I like to suggest is, if you haven't really thought much about that yet, the first question really to consider is, are you a person who really likes to work inside or outside? Because that's going to impact your job and your satisfaction with it a great deal. If you really love being outside, having a desk job isn't probably going to be for you. So really think hard about that. And particularly for the area where you live or would like to live, what's the conditions outside? If you're going to be dealing with cold weather or really hot weather, rain, snow, wind, in a particular profession, is that something you're going to like or not? Because you want to be able to enjoy your profession. Okay, so think about the inside, outside. And then if you're an outside person, do you want to be out in the field? Say you were a forestry person, and you might have to be hiking around in the forest doing studies to see what's happening there. Is that something you're up for? Are you physically able to do that? Are you a person that likes working with your hands, or do you really want to spend most of your effort thinking in your brain? Not that handwork doesn't involve your brain too, both do. But is it primarily something that is very physical with your hands, or is it something that it might involve lifting or any heavy-duty things, like for instance construction, or say being a diesel mechanic, or all of those things involve a lot of some strength. Is that something you think you can do? Or are you really more of a desk job person? Are you want to be writing code, for example, or just writing text? Do you want to be doing analysis? Is a desk job your sort of thing? Or not all desk jobs are just strictly tied to your desk, but moving around, working with other people, but being an inside. And all jobs are going to require some people skills. You can't avoid working with people. But there are jobs that are definitely better for introverts than for your extrovert types. So consider your personality, what you like to do, where you like to do it, what physically you are capable of doing. Are you somebody working with your hands? You like doing landscaping, plumbing, construction, designing, all of those sort of things. Keep those into your mind when you choose what career you want to put for A. One other thought I had about the career management in deciding inside or outside is also keep in mind the hours you might keep. For example, if you're a first responder, either a policeman, a fireman, a healthcare worker, a doctor, those folks are going to be working some long shifts and having hours that go through the night to cover the needs of people 24/7. So that's a consideration as well for what career you might be wanting to choose. And then discuss with your counselor the needed qualifications, education, skills, and experience. So we've talked a little bit about the skills, those intrinsic things about you that might give you an edge on a particular vocation, and also experience. If possible, try to spend some time in your high school summers in particular, on maybe having some sort of summer job that would kind of put you into that position. Maybe you could shadow somebody for a day or two who does the job that you're interested in, to see if that really is something that you like. And the qualifications. Say you want to be a computer designer. Do you have the math and the science skills to be able to get your engineering degree, for example? And be realistic about it. So think about the qualifications, education, skills, and experience that you would need. And you can look online and see what type of education is needed. Is it a 2-year degree? Is it a 4-year degree? Say you want to be a medical doctor. Well, you're going to be in school for a while, because you probably have to do a 4-year undergrad, and then you're going to be in med school for a while and being an intern for a while. So it's going to take you a while. Or you want to be a lawyer. There's going to be additional work beyond a 4-year degree for that as well. So set your expectations appropriately on number of years that you're going to be in school, and how much brain work and hand work that you want for your particular profession. Well, and also, what is the likely pay? That's a consideration too. Is something that I really love going to be able to provide the lifestyle that I hope to have? And maybe that sounds sort of, I won't make up the term, but let's be realistic about it. Some professions pay more than others, and there's different demand. Sometimes it's just only certain people have the skill to really go into that. I know I would never make a good lawyer or a doctor, and so I appreciate the folks that go into those professions, but that wouldn't be for me. So keep that in mind on what you pick there and the research that you do. And then B, explain to your counselor what the associated costs might be to pursue this career, such as tuition, school or training supplies, room and board, and how you could prepare for these costs and how you might make up for any shortfall. All right, well, there's a lot of loaded questions in that one. So let's just assume many degrees require 4 years. So that would be, such as a state university or a private college to do a particular career. So anticipate 4 years of college, and depending on where you go, the costs, you just need to maybe visit those schools and find out what the tuition rate is for each of those per year. And also, they will probably require you at least the first year to live in the dorms on campus, unless you're going to, say, a community college where you'd probably live in the area, hopefully at home. So that's a cost, and I'm not even going to speculate on what it would be. It definitely is different for a state university versus an Ivy League private or a private school. So consider those kind of things, and there's a lot of different programs that allow you to get a certificate and allow you to be in a particular profession. Maybe you need a certain certificate to be an electrician, for example, or a plumber. And so maybe that's a 2-year program at a vocational school. All things that you will find when you do your research. And explain how you could prepare for these costs and how you might make up for any shortfall. Well, this falls back into our financial aspects of it, and we talked about getting loans. There are lots of places that want to give you student loans, and like I've mentioned before, you also want to try to keep yourself out of debt. And so any jobs you can have during high school, be realistic in a conversation with your parents on what they might be able to help you do for college expenses, and figuring out how you can make it work for the time you would need to be in school. And if it just doesn't, the numbers don't work out, I would pursue strongly looking for scholarships, either with the school itself, or community scholarships, or even national scholarships. Depending on your situation, there could be great opportunities for that. And all of that's available online too. So paying for school, so yourself, for parents and other extended family members. Maybe you've got some savings, the school scholarships themselves, and external scholarships are all possibilities to help you pay for that. Well, we've made it through all of personal management. Thank you for sticking with me. I know this is a very long merit badge, but there's so much material in it that's so worthwhile. And I hope you realize, just as I believe, that this is a life-changing merit badge, particularly if you're able to put these sort of things in practice and adjust your behaviors for your life in a positive way. So I just have some final thoughts to share with you just as we wrap this up. I mentioned earlier about learning to cook. I strongly encourage you to use your cooking skills that you learn in your cooking merit badge, to put those into practice at home. When you're at the store, make sure you got all the ingredients for something to cook so that you can do it at home. You aren't forced to go out to eat. Not that you can't ever go out, of course not. But being able to eat at home most of the time will save you a lot of money. So I can't emphasize that enough. Another real strong point I want to make is if you should have a credit card in the future, be sure to try to pay that credit card off every month. If you don't have self-control, just cut the darn things up. You need to be able to pay that off every month, or you're going to be paying a lot in interest. And maybe at some point you meet that special someone and you are considering getting married. Be careful before you commit so that you are at least having your eyes open wide on the money management style of that other person. Are you a saver and they're a spender? Well, there could be some conflict there. So go in with your eyes open, be aware of their money management style and your money management style, how well those work together or how they don't, and get that resolved before you commit. That's my advice. Also, you're going to have a bank account, a checking and savings account of some sort. I strongly encourage you to look at your statements every month. Make sure that what the bank has included in your statement is legitimate. I've caught the bank in mistakes before, and so it's not inconceivable, and sometimes they're big. So do reconcile your accounts every month. And don't, at some point you might want to buy a house. And most likely that's going to be something that you're going to get in debt for, because very rarely does someone have enough money to buy a house outright, or a car, or starting a business. And you're going to need to get a loan to do that in some way, shape, or form. And so have that plan on getting out of debt. But maybe you want to wait a little while for it so that you can save up a little bit more before you get into that purchase. Because particularly if you're buying a house, there's something called mortgage insurance, and if you don't put down 20% towards a house purchase, they'll be charging you that mortgage insurance. So that's, so to speak, to protect the lender in case you would default on that. And so it's an extra cost, and so I would really encourage you to try to have 20% down before you buy a house, and preferably more. We talked a little bit about, if you're having a meeting, to have a list of action items that are recorded and owners and timelines for that is shared with those people that are in the meeting and followed up by you on making sure all of that gets done. Is a huge thing to help you make progress on projects at home or at work or with different organizations in the community. Something else we hadn't really talked about, but let's just say you're patrol leader or the senior patrol leader for your troop, or you're working with your beneficiary, and you need to leave messages for people to get something done. So let's just say you're talking to your patrol, and you say you'd like to talk to someone, but maybe you don't. You have to leave a message. Make sure that you cover the who, what, where, when, why, and how aspects of your message to them. Who you are, you're the patrol leader. What you're calling about is the scout meeting, say for this next week. Why? Well, you are committed to going to scout meetings, so that's why you're calling. You're letting them know what's happening. Who, what, where, normal meeting place or something different this week. Maybe you're doing a swimming set of requirements, and so you're meeting at the pool rather than your normal meeting place. Well, that's something they would need to know. That's the where. The when. Is it the normal meeting time or is it a different meeting time? And any other how. So who, what, where, when, why, and how. Cover all of those different aspects. So it's the difference between saying, hi, this is Bob, your patrol leader, and I'm just calling about the meeting on Tuesday. Please come. Versus a message like, hi, this is Bob, your patrol leader. I'm calling my Rabid Squirrels Patrol, reminding you we're meeting at the church at 7 p.m. on Tuesday night. Be sure to wear your uniform, bring your scout book, and then we will be doing knots, and we will be doing the Family Life Merit Badge. Be prepared for those things. That's the difference between covering all those who, what, where, when, how, and why, versus just doing the minimum. Makes a big difference. So in that sense, you're pushing the ball forward to making sure that they know what they need to do before they come. The next one is, we talked about the credit report, and I didn't mention this in the section, but those credit reporting agencies will give you a free copy of your credit report every year. So I would recommend every 3 to 4 months having a reminder in your calendar that says, I can get my free credit report from Experian in the month of March, and I'll do it again next March and the month March after that. And so then say in August, I have the TransUnion come up on my calendar to say I'm going to get the credit report from that credit agency, and again the next August. And I can continually monitor my credit report and see if there's anything that's funny that's showing up on that. So get that every year from those different agencies. We talked about investments in stocks, particularly do save for retirement through your company 401k type plan. If they have a company match, make use of that. That's basically free money. But my warning to you is it's great to have some company stock. If you feel your company is doing great, invest in some of that, but don't be too heavy in it. Because should things go downhill, you could lose your wealth in that account and also your job, and that would put you in a big bind. So yes, it's fine to have some company stock, but not so heavy in it that you are so dependent on the success of your company that you work for. So keep those things in mind. And also just having a diversified set of investments over time. Some stocks, some bonds, maybe some real estate, and rebalance as you see fit to keep things sort of in check that way. And then we talked in time management about using to-do lists. I strongly encourage you to do to-do lists. They keep me, that's my system for keeping track of what's going on. And it's great to have goals, but a system that regularly keeps you on track is even better. So make use of your calendar, make use of to-do lists to get the things done that you need to. And then you won't forget about that assignment or that meeting that you were going to have with someone, or just even time with friends. So do the to-do list. Then another tip for you is I highly encourage you to get a job in high school. That will provide you amazing insight into the workforce and set appropriate expectations later in life. And just, I can't emphasize, even if you're busy with schoolwork, maybe you're out for a sport or two, if you can, particularly in the summers, get a summer job, get a job after school or on weekends. Even a few hours a week will make a big difference in just your perspective about work. And this is kind of a communication sort of thing, but I highly encourage you to write thank you notes. And yeah, it's fine to do a little thank you over email or maybe a thank you text, but I'm kind of old school in that, and I know my mother is, that she likes to have a thank you note from her grandchildren when she's given them a gift. And same thing for maybe you have a job opportunity and you've met with someone about that job, send them a thank you note to thank them for spending the time to look at your qualifications. It's doing something that not everyone else is doing, and that can really set you apart. And so all of these things can really set you apart by these different behaviors. And so writing thank you notes is one that I really encourage you to do as well. This one gets back to the different credit cards and debit cards. And that is, keep track of that PIN. Memorize it if you can, or keep it very far from your card. Protect that PIN number for a debit card so that it isn't forgotten. And then, let's see, and then if you've got different accounts, say at a bank, this last one is, you might say, oh, I want to have an auto withdrawal every month for some service, maybe a music service or some sort of video service. Keep track of how many of those you have withdrawing from your account on a regular basis, and just it can kind of catch up to you and start really draining your account. So know how your money is being spent. You know that through your budget, and just really keeping on top of your accounts, and that will really help you gain wealth over time. So thank you again for watching this video for personal management. I just hope that you can make use of many of these ideas and that personal management was worth your time. I truly believe it is. Thank you.